Everyone loves to scale their favorite main character and place them in a battle with others. But who starts out the strongest? I saw this picture and thought it would make for a good video. Although, funny enough, most of the pictures here aren't even from the first episode, but whatever. We'll take all 9 characters from this roster, and there's only a few rules here. 1. This is free-for-all. 2. Everyone's in character from this point in the story. 3. It's based on the end of episode 1 of their anime, not chapter 1 of their manga or the very first appearance of them. Specifically, how strong they are and what powers they have by the end of episode 1. Otherwise, some of these characters wouldn't even have powers. Equipment from episode 1 is allowed too. 4. Will determine the winner by killing, so this will be a death match. And 5. This battle would take place in an empty town environment with no other people, so people can use their surroundings. It's also daytime with no full moon, so Goku doesn't transform. First, let's start out by actually scaling everybody. We won't be just using episode 1 feats, we'll be basically looking through each of their first arcs to understand their powers, and see what they would realistically be capable of at full power in episode 1. Even though this is just based on episode 1, most of them won't have feats until a few episodes later, but we're of course going to be reasonable and we won't take feats after a certain point. Now, like I said, this is just based off their episode 1 power, but we need to find some way to gauge that. Like, if someone pulls off something at the start of episode 2, that realistically would apply to their episode 1 selves, but if they pull something off in episode 50, that's probably not going to happen in episode 1. Also, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into depth with the calculations or anything since we're scaling 9 people here. The roster starts with Goku. Goku is a very strong start here because Goku is already really strong in episode 1. We also have a ton that we could work off of for his past. If he fights under a full moon, of course he gets giant and grows 10 times stronger, but he's uncontrolled, and we're not doing a fight in that scenario though, so that's irrelevant here. I mentioned that for a good reason though, because starting with Dragon Ball is kind of convoluted. As many of you probably know, a lot of anime and manga have different scaling from each other because sometimes there's anime-only feats. And that's especially the case for Dragon Ball. You could push anime Goku probably way higher than I'm going to push him, so let's keep it kind of reasonable. He's easily building level early on, with subsonic combat and reactions. The reason I brought up Great Ape is because, well, you could scale Goku off that. Great Ape Goku destroyed Pilaf's castle really easily, and base Goku is exactly 10 times weaker than that. Also, in base, we see him surviving headshots at point blank, destroying cars and boulders, beating up large animals no issue, things like that. There's one other thing. Goku technically has divine protection from the get-go. With Super Story, Bardock had Minato wish that his sons would grow up well. Of course, Goku and Raditz did die eventually, but technically, until adulthood, this wish would protect him. With the way the wish was phrased, even with the 2 of them dying eventually, it looks like the wish still did take some sort of effect. Goku can be defeated, obviously, but you could reasonably argue that he can't die in this fight. And since it's a deathmatch, that might mean he would win by default, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here, especially because that happens way later on and arguably not even in the same continuity. Because that's only in the Dragon Ball Super manga, which is different from the anime, and blah 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 Dragon Ball continuity stuff. You know what I mean. Anyways, Goku has no major key abilities just yet, but he can copy people really easily and he's an insanely good martial artist. Plus, he has his power pool. Next is Gon. Gon doesn't have any powers right off the jump. He has no access to Nen right away, though he is way stronger than an average person. It's nothing too impressive though. He could outspeed a normal person's reactions. And also he's comparable to a lot of the other Hunter examinees, actually above most of them. Unfortunately, a lot of his strength and power feats come after training, like even before actually getting Nen, so it's tough to get a baseline for pre-exam Gon. You basically can only use the stuff that he pulls off in the exam. I'd say he's comfortably at subsonic reactions and combat speed, and he's anywhere between street and wall level for power. For abilities, he's a survivalist who can analyze combat situations really well, but he has nothing supernatural in terms of powers right now. He's basically just a really strong dude, for regular human standards. Next, Naruto. As many of you know, I have not read or watched this story yet. And hold on now, this is the only character in the video I had to do this for. I've read every other series in this video, so it's not like I'm trying to scale series that I don't know. I usually exclude Naruto from my videos because of that, but I won't here. I consulted a couple of friends to help with the scaling here, and I did actually read the first arc for this video. So, I know some stuff is missing, but is this my start for actually reading Naruto? Well, I'll give it another arc and see if I like it, but anyways, if something's wrong here, that's why. Feel free to correct me in the comments. I'm basing it off of 1 arc's worth of knowledge and what my friends have told me. I read through Land of Waves, which is like 33 chapters, and on top of that, I watched episode 1, so I feel like that's enough. I don't know, I'm not watching the whole series yet for this one video. Naruto has a lot of abilities off rip. Some things like transforming, Shadow Clone Jutsu, general martial arts and shinobi skills, and Kurama's a part of him. In a dire situation, he could be pushed into having that power unleashed. However, I mean like really dire circumstances. I don't think that's going to happen here. Unlike Goku, we won't really need to restrict this power because Goku requires a full moon for it. But for Naruto, he could tap into this power. It's just that I don't think he would easily tap into it during this battle. There would be nothing that would push him like that. Unless we throw Sasuke into this battle and have him nearly killed. Right in episode 1 we see Naruto in a tough situation and he's not pushed into activating that power, so I doubt this will appear here. Anyways, even with my admittedly little knowledge on Naruto, I placed him at subsonic with large building level power. Though one of my friends showed me some scaling based off Sasuke that would push them to city block level, so personally I'll say Naruto's between the two of those. Above large building level but not quite city block. I think that's kind of fair. Although, power aside, I feel like his abilities are the more impressive thing at this point. Next, Edward Elric. Ed has a great start. He has alchemy right from the get-go and he's incredibly skilled. Not to mention, he has auto-mail as his equipment, so he's basically going to have any arm-sized weapon that he wants, or leg-sized weapon. As for his alchemy abilities, well, he can basically warp the battlefield in any way he wants. No matter where he is, this is a huge plus, and since the battle will be in a town, that's going to be even better. Even if we did this in somewhere like a forest, that would still be good for him. It's not like he's going to be the only one to take advantage of his environment, but for a power like his, he's uniquely advantaged here. Even if we took an entirely empty flat battleground, he'd still be advantaged. Ed's actually pretty fast too. He's faster than bullets, and as early as chapter 2, he has a feat where he's able to perform alchemy in the time it takes a bullet to be fired and reach him. In the same chapter, he creates a giant statue with his alchemy too. He just barely breaks through supersonic speeds, and I'd say we could easily place him around building level here. And throughout this video, even if I mention manga chapters, this will still obviously apply to the anime's episode 1 as well. Goku was the only weird case because of how much Toei changed the scaling there. Next up is Luffy. Luffy also has powers from the beginning, since he's had his devil fruit as part of him for a while. Only Gum Gum powers at this point, of course, but no Haki or any powers from his true fruit's nature. As for destructive feats, it's easy to scale him off the fight with Arlong, which I know is many episodes away from episode 1, but it's within the same saga, and Luffy doesn't grow noticeably stronger to any significant degree during this time. Plus, One Piece arcs are just really long in general, so even though this seems so far ahead, within the story itself, it's not really too crazy. We see Luffy destroying buildings at full force, so we know at the very least he's going to be somewhere in the large building level range. But you could push him even higher with Sanji and Don Krieg too. Luffy's above Sanji, and Sanji's kicks are casually able to send the Mackerel Head ship flying right off the bat. This is after Don Krieg already threw the ship towards him too. It's not like he just kicked a ship that was standing still. A feat like this alone is large building level, and Sanji does it casually, and then Luffy's stronger than him. So, instead of placing Luffy at like large building level, I'd say he's more like city block tier. Probably multi-city block, especially because you could scale Sanji even higher from this, but for this video, let's say city block plus. One big thing to note for Luffy though is that any cutting powers or sharp things can counter his rubber powers. Now obviously in terms of raw attack power, Luffy's going to be one of the stronger ones here. Like just based on the people I've covered so far, he's already the strongest. Unfortunately for him though, multiple characters here have weapons to cut him. Or in the case of Denji, he actually becomes a cutting weapon. Let's cover him next. Denji doesn't immediately start off with his Chainsaw Man powers, of course that happens later on in episode 1. Denji was already somewhat experienced hunting devils, but episode 1 Denji only just got his powers, so he's not going to have experience with them right away. It's kind of tough to get speed feats for him this early on too. For two reasons. For one, you're scaling the speed feats off of others. Second, like I said, Denji only just got his powers, so while Luffy for example can take feats from later episodes, Denji's power in episode 1 might not be the same as his power a few episodes later, because he only just got the powers. But let's try using that though. He did blitz someone who had a gun aimed at him from a few meters away, and the gun didn't even get fired when this happened. In the same scene, and others too, he fights Katana Man, and he should easily outspeed low tier devils. So for episode 1 Denji, we'll just use a ballpark estimate. This is gonna be kinda stupid here, I'm gonna base it off of how fast people could swing swords. The fastest sword swings are like 100 miles an hour, and if we assume Katana Man's faster than that, which I think is reasonable, I guess we could just double that and say 200 miles an hour. And then Denji's fighting him, so let's put him at subsonic, particularly for episode 1 Denji. His abilities are pretty obvious. He's not really practiced yet, but obviously he has his chainsaws to fight with. He also has healing and regen if he gets blood from anyone, which could keep him going through this fight. Though he has a really weird disadvantage here. Like Ed, part of his body is now made of metal, which can actually put him at a disadvantage against alchemy. Of course, alchemy can be used on people regardless, but since part of his body is inorganic, it might make it even easier for Ed to exploit. But on the flip side, he has an advantage here. He can cut stuff, so that would be a slight advantage against Luffy, even with the strength gap. For power, he's probably like small building level here. I feel like that's his ceiling at this point. Ichigo's another example of someone who ends their intro by getting powers, so most of his power will be based off his very first fight. But it's also weird because his power is Rukia's power too. Outside of that, the only thing that Ichigo has going for him is the fact that he already was fighting as a regular human. He would always get into brawls and he does have martial arts experience. Any other skills or abilities that he has though is probably irrelevant for episode 1. Now, he is strong physically, but he has no experience with those new powers. And like Naruto, despite having other crazy abilities and potential locked away, nothing will bring them out in this fight. Like I mentioned, he has Rukia's powers on top of already being strong, so we could kind of base him off of her level, alongside basing him off his first fight with a Hollow, and even though it's a little bit down the line, his first fight with Renji too. We're using that as a ceiling so we could work our way backwards. Based off of that alone, as well as Ichigo's first fight and the powers that we know he has, plus what we know about Rukia, in terms of physical power, we could easily get him to somewhere like town level if you're majorly lowballing it. Subsonic speed tier 2. You could push him higher based on later feats, but at this point when he has no knowledge of his powers or even using a sword, I think it's fair to place him around here, which makes him the strongest already. And like I said, that's kind of lowballing it too. Also, he's intangible and invisible. People like Ed and Sukuna can interact with souls, but this is a huge disadvantage for a lot of other people. For the sake of fairness here, and since we usually do verse equalization anyways, let's have him be tangible and visible here. It's so weird because he has no clue what he's doing, but he physically outshines everyone else, and if we didn't equalize the verses, he'd be literally untouchable. Well, by most. Because we have Sukuna. Since we're using Yuji at the end of episode 1, this will actually be both of them together. Even though Yuji is strong prior to having Sukuna become a part of him, that's only in comparison to the average person. He's like pro athlete level, and that's not going to help much here, since these are not average people. Like at best something like wall level. And just like Ichigo, Yuji has no clue about Jujutsu even though he is powerful. Although Sukuna is only at one finger here, and Yuji has some control over him too. So he might hold Sukuna back, but if Yuji dies, which I think is pretty likely, then Sukuna's going to take over, in which case we're going to have to scale Sukuna too. Scaling one-finger Sukuna is a bit tough though, since he doesn't do much. We'll have to ballpark it based off of two-finger Sukuna, who actually does have some feats. When Yuji dies, because he's probably going to die, Sukuna can and will take over. He has access to reverse curse technique, so as long as he doesn't take a huge amount of damage at once, he could heal himself. He could also use his domain still. He could perceive and attack souls. Funny enough, even though he's really weakened here, he still has a lot of his abilities. Having only one finger isn't going to prevent him from doing a bunch of other stuff. It just means his attacks won't be as powerful, and his pool of cursed energy will be smaller. But most importantly, Sukuna can take over someone else. Just by ripping off one of Yuji's fingers, he could transfer to another vessel. He could also incarnate into his old self if things get really bad, but this is mainly good for a full heal and getting the extra arms. I actually did recently make a video about Sukuna taking over other MCs, including some of the people here, so if you're kind of curious about that type of scenario, I'd suggest checking out that video. I won't go too in-depth about how Sukuna could take over people here. Anyways, two-finger Sukuna scales above people like Mahito and Nanami already. So he's comfortably city block level at this point with speeds around transonic. Now, Sukuna's fingers aren't explicitly worth like 5% of his power each. You could interpret it as that, or that each finger is 5% of his pool of cursed energy, or that the boost from each finger isn't linear. I think all those interpretations are valid, and it's not worth getting lost in the weeds over. For simplicity, let's say that one-finger Sukuna is half as strong as two-finger Sukuna, and that each finger is worth 5% of his power. And as silly as it sounds, half of city block level is still city block level, because two-finger Sukuna is probably at the higher end of that, and he'd only get bumped down a tier if he was really at the low end of it. Finally, we have Asta. He's all about physicals in the start, so he's at a good place here, but there's a huge issue with him. Episode 1 and Chapter 1 have a time skip right after, so by the time Chapter 2 and Episode 2 roll around, Asta has 6 months of extra training. In Chapter 1, he's also pretty much impossible to scale. His best and pretty much only feat is hitting Revchi with his sword so hard that he gets implanted into a big wall. If we're being generous, Asta was injured here, and this is the only attack of his that we saw, so we can maybe highball him to like somewhere between wall and small building level. Besides Asta being injured, it was also a pretty thick wall that he got knocked into. So, at his full power, yeah, I think just beyond wall level is pretty good. The weird thing is, Black Clover gets really fast really quick thanks to light magic. There is no way Episode 1 Asta is even on that level, but given how fast people in this verse are and how quickly they get up to that point, even the weaker ones, Asta is definitely going to be way faster than the average person at the start. Now, we have absolutely nothing to base his speed off of, and there's no way to gauge his speed here in general, especially pre-training. So let's just make him relative to everyone else by saying he's like supersonic. That way he at least has the edge in speed against some people, and considering the major speed increase he gets later on, I think this is more than fair. Now for the actual fight itself, and if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps out the channel and shows me that you like what I'm doing. Hyping the video really helps too. In terms of combat experience, the top tiers in this battle are pretty clearly going to be people like Goku, Luffy, Ed, Ichigo, and Sukuna. Everyone else lacks experience to some extent. And to be fair, Ichigo's combat experience is just street brawling essentially, as well as knowing some martial arts like a regular person. Sukuna definitely is going to be the most experienced here when it comes to fighting. Let's get some quick eliminations out of the way first. Gon is dead pretty early on. He's smart, adaptable, and tough for a kid, but he's completely outclassed here. No ranged options, no regen, no hacks, no answer to city block tier monsters swinging for kills. Like, he might just survive a little longer by hiding and running, but eventually he runs into someone that he's not going to be able to hurt at all. Asta's also cooked pretty early on. Even if we're generous with speed, he has 0 experience with anti-magic, and it wouldn't even be relevant here, and he's got no durability feats on this level, and one clean hit from basically anyone above building level will put him down. He's brave, but bravery isn't going to stop a chainsaw, a Zanpakuto, or Sukuna's cleave. Yuji probably dies pretty quickly too, which gives Sukuna full control, so he's technically not out of the fight. Denji's a wild card though, because he's reckless, brutal, and he's hard to put down thanks to his regeneration, though again he's also someone who's inexperienced with his powers at this point. If he figures out that getting blood and drinking it will help him regenerate, that could keep him going for a little bit longer, but that said, Episode 1 Denji's sloppy. He's not going to be incredibly strategic, and he definitely doesn't have a lot of experience. Sure, he's hunted devils before and knows how to use a chainsaw, but not really as part of himself. The bigger issue is that he's outscaled by a lot of other people. Now we're left with the biggest contenders. Ed's a weird case because hypothetically he could be pretty dangerous, but he's not going to get far. His battlefield control with alchemy is going to be insane, especially in an empty town setting like this. And like I mentioned before, even if we did any sort of other environment, he'd have an advantage with that. Walls, spikes, restraints, trenches, he could use the environment to his advantage. Plus his auto mail is going to help him out too. It's just that his attack power isn't high enough to put down the top tiers fast, and he could restrain, slow, and disrupt people, but if someone like Luffy or Goku closes the gap, Ed doesn't survive a clean hit. At least he could try and counter Luffy with sharp objects like turning his auto mail into a sword, but that's really it. Naruto is going to last pretty long, mainly due to his clones and his trickery. In a free-for-all, Shadow Clone Jutsu is going to be pretty annoying and buy him a lot of time. Plus, he scales decently high. But without Kurama's help, his durability is not going to be on the level of the highest tiers here. Now, I think he's going to make it really far, but he's also going to be outscaled by some others. Early Luffy is also a monster, his strength is absurd for the stage, and blunt force attacks aren't going to work on him at all. He's also incredibly hard to put down even without Haki. But this matchup is pretty rough for him because multiple characters can hard counter rubber. Now, of course, people like Denji or Ed probably don't have the attack power to overcome him, but Ichigo and Sukuna are stronger than him, and a lot of their attacks are just cutting attacks. Luffy being made of rubber isn't going to matter to them. Plus, he's not particularly tactical just yet. Sure, he has combat experience, but nothing really like this. He wipes out a lot of the mid-tiers, but against the final ones, nah, not really. Funny enough, Episode 1 Goku is actually one of the mid-tiers here. He has elite martial arts instincts and really good pain tolerance, plus help from the power pole, but yeah, he's probably not going to make it too far. The Bardock Wish does complicate things though, because if you want to argue Goku literally cannot die here, then the debate's over. He wins by default, but if not, Goku actually gets mogged pretty quick. Plus, his tail is a weak spot. Now, not everyone's going to know that, but if someone somehow just grabs him by the tail at some point, he's immobilized, and then Goku's really screwed. Goku's not as impressive here as you might think, even if you try to highball him. So I think Naruto and Luffy are solid runner-ups. Naruto has a huge variety of powers, and both of these two are physically very powerful. However, I think it's clear that the remaining two are going to be Ichigo and Sukuna. These two are the biggest issues. Ichigo simply has too much power, even lowballed, while Sukuna is versatile and strong. Now, despite the gap, Sukuna's soul attacks also bypass durability, but for someone like Ichigo, whose powers are all about soul attacks, he also counters stuff like that. Sukuna out-hacks most people, especially with his domain. Hell, he could even use his Divine Flame and try and blow everyone up. Now, with better experience, he might be able to outpace Ichigo. Plus, Incarnation's a good last resort, he has his domain, and he even has Binding Vows. Plus, he could always transfer to one of the other bodies. Now, for Naruto, it's probably not going to work thanks to Kurama, and I also covered in that Sukuna taking over other MCs video why Luffy might not work, but most other people here could. I think Goku might be his best bet here, even though he's not going to give him a bunch of other abilities, but he definitely will at least give him an increase in power. Though I think that's Sukuna's best chance, otherwise he's probably cooked, because he's not going to be able to put Ichigo down that easily. I'd say Ichigo wins this mid to high diff, only thanks to him resisting Sukuna and the strength gap between everyone else. Sukuna's a solid second place, and if he takes over the right person, which is easier said than done, especially because they would need to survive him in the first place, then Sukuna could be the victor. Naruto and Luffy would be solid runner-ups, and that's really that. Unless Goku can't die, of course. Let me know what you think below though. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.